For the last 2, 3 years at least, there have been only two pillars of growth. That was consumption, private consumption, and government spending. We know that because of NPAs, etc., private investment had fallen off considerably. Now consumption's gone as well. So we're really down to only government spending. This is pre-pandemic. Pandemic sort of, narrows that situation a lot further. Yet, when asked in previous interviews whether you think that this is the right time for the government to spend more than it already has, bulk of which has been more monetary than fiscal, you've said that maybe that's not a good idea at all. We went into this crisis or this pandemic with high deficits, high debt, and maybe the government shouldn't do that. So, in effect, if governments don't spend, if the government doesn't step up spending at this point in time, that's yet another headwind that could impact trend growth over the next 3 to 5 years.
Right. And that's just the reality. I think that this is where I've been so disappointed by the economic discourse in India, because it's clear that our egos are way bigger than what the reality is. I've used this quote before, from my favorite movie, Top Gun, that our ego keeps writing checks that our body can't cash, which is that all the economic experts in India want a massive stimulus. They want a stimulus and they keep referring to US and UK or even Germany. And the fact of the matter is that those countries are in a very different spot because they have their own reserve currency, or they have a currency that people have still faith in. And the fact is that we went into this crisis with very high public debt levels, at least for a developing country. So we just don't have the capacity to enact a massive stimulus. And I think that is something which should have even been thought of as we were enacting the most stringent lockdown in the world, that how are we going to pay for this? But once that was done, there was no choice but to carry out whatever little stimulus we could, because anything more than that would have led to, I think, a major erosion in confidence in the Indian currency, and also potentially led to much higher inflation. This is another unique aspect of India, that our inflation rates are much more sticky than what we see in the developed world. The classic inflation of consumer price inflation, the developed world is not seeing any inflation, and so therefore they're going on with these monetary experiments. But India's inflation rate has been much more sticky compared to those countries. And other developing countries, such as Turkey, that have tried to carry out a very unorthodox approach, have gone in trouble. So in fact, Turkey last week raised interest rates by a couple of 100 basis points because they had to restore some faith back in their currency. So that's, I think, a very important point, that we are just not living within our means or seeing what the ground reality is. And we keep thinking that we can print our way out of trouble, not realizing what the consequences could be. So I have a quarrel with the fact that whether we should have imposed such a stringent lockdown, given our economic situation, given what a lockdown may or may not have achieved for a developing country, given the population density and the living conditions. But after that was done, to expect that we could enact a Western-style stimulus was totally unrealistic and irresponsible as far as that advice goes. And I think that it was either driven by a huge degree of self-importance or just political scoring points against the government. So I was not in favor at all of anything more in terms of stimulus, but I think that would have done even more damage to India's finances and eventually India's economic credibility.